Welcome back to another Friends of Constructed Adventures interview. Today, I'm actually going to be chatting again with Yacine and Michelle. You might remember them if you have been following all of my output since the beginning on Instagram before I switched over. I had a wonderful conversation with them about their subscription puzzle tale called Society of Curiosities, which I play and love. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too. What we're also going to be focusing on a little bit more is their new Kickstarter, which is the Fairy Tale Files, which is also a puzzle tale, which is set in the fairy tale world, kind of murder mystery. And then we're going to talk about processes and how they work and how they work together and how things are going in Hawaii, because it's probably better than here in Portland. So without further ado, Michelle, Yacine, thank you guys so much for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So first and foremost, is there anything that I missed or anything you want to add in specifically to like what you guys do, between Escape Room Society and Fairy Tale Files?
Those are the projects right now, yes.
You covered it perfectly.
Oh, yes, I know. Sometimes I get done and they're just like, yep, and you mispronounced or misspelled our names. And I'm like, no!
No from us.
So, for anybody that's just joining in or joins in a little bit late, feel free to add any questions in the chat. I will be monitoring that, and we can add those in. I have some questions that I always like to ask, as well as questions I took from Instagram. And just like we've been doing for, the last couple interviews now, we have a fun game puzzle that they have put together for me to struggle through and pray that the chat can help me through if they're not all just watching election stuff. So the first question I always love to ask about is, tell me a little bit about your life path. I'd love to know about little Michelle, little Yacine, and like what got you to where you are today.
All right, life
You're older.
path.
You're older, you get to go.
Wow, that's a rough start. All right, so my life path in games. So I started playing Dungeons and Dragons in my early teens, and then in my early 20s, I was working for a digital marketing company. We're talking 2007. And back then, blogging was just starting and exploding, and people were making money. And my bosses were like, "Blogging is it." But so you should try it out just to see what's going on in that world. Just choose a topic that you can write about. And I was like, either and choose a topic that no one's doing too much, right? So back then, my interests were like sports, but everybody does that. And I was like, D&D. I could write about D&D every day forever. So I started a blog. It became the biggest D&D blog on the internet. I did some freelancing for Wizards of the Coast and some self-publishing of role-playing games, and took a little hiatus. And then in the 2015, we got into the escape room world. So that's kind of how I got into the puzzle industry.
Yeah, and so when we started escape rooms, I always thought I wasn't like a puzzle person or a game person, but recently artifacts have come about that actually show that I was. I found this old like Nancy Drew type book where I had cut out a hidden compartment in it and hidden like a Santa dollar. And so I'm like, okay, well, obviously I loved hidden compartments. And then my mom found this note that I wrote to her, and it was done in a cipher. Like when I was in second grade or something, I was making little ciphers for her. And I have no recollection of any of this. At some point, I went through a phase wanting to become an architect so I can design hidden passageways, though. But then I realized I didn't like math enough to become, but I was fixated on hidden passageways. So I guess for me, the focus has always been on the novel, the surprise. I have a background in dance and theater and art, so the storytelling is really important to me. So I guess those are all the things that kind of came into what I do to build where we are now.
That's really amazing, and I love hearing about kind of the initial stories because I'm the same way, just very very similar. Like Michelle, when you were talking about your upbringing, I was like, are we the same person? Because I never consider myself, I backed into this industry by doing a thing for somebody on Reddit, and then discovered that there's a lot of people that are doing really cool things, and then it gave me imposter syndrome of like, oh man, am I like not good at this? Like, have I not gone? Because a lot of people are like, I've been doing puzzles since I was a kid. We've been doing all this. And then my mom sent me little notes, little rhyming notes that I'd burned the edges that were like a little treasure scavenger hunt throughout the house. And I was like, okay, no, I've been doing this for a while. I'm okay. I'm allowed to you know, throw my weight around, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah.
So I guess going into that, where do you get your inspiration for each thing? And I'd love to hear a little bit about how you got into the escape room industry because it's still so new, even though it's kind of not anymore. It's like entering adolescence almost.
Yeah.
Mhm. So we got into it the old-fashioned way by accident.
Yeah, of course.
So we played a game in Montreal in 2015, and we loved it. We played the game the next day, and we also loved it. So we started building games at home for our friends. So we have a 30-foot trailer, an Airstream trailer. So we built a game, A Witch's Den, for Halloween that year. And then we built a Valentine's Day serial killer game inside our house. We cleared one room, and
And locked our friends in.
yeah, and then Michelle thought there was a market, and I did not. So to settle the argument, I built a fake website with fake games to prove her wrong. And of course, she was right. Within a couple of weeks, people were trying to book the fake games on our fake website, and it just, it didn't have a checkout system. It just says like it's not a real thing yet.
That
Uh,
is amazing. Did you at least get like their emails? So afterwards, you're like, wait, it's real now. Like, come hire us. Come spend money with
yeah,
us.
Did it, right? I think he was really sure he was going to prove me wrong.
Oh my god,
yeah,
that
not
is.
even. Yeah. Um,
It's a nice way to be proven wrong, though. Where it's like we have a whole new enterprise and like money we can make and things like that, and have fun, right? That's
Yeah.
one of the nice things about this industry is like it's still getting there, but people really enjoy. And you can see the games where people enjoy it because they love making games, and you can see things. You can see where what is on the bottom of your mugs. Oh, okay. That might be part of the puzzle. I need to write something down here. I love this so much. Um, okay. I'm so distracted right now. This is so much fun. Um, okay, so I want to take a quick bit of time and like shamelessly plug your things that you're doing and then dive further into like processes things like that. And so can we first talk a little bit about Society of Curiosities? I gotta make sure this is right in front. I don't want to like spoil too much, so it's just gonna be like, look at this, but don't look at that. Look at this, look at that. How did that come about? When did it start? And tell me about like you started shifting from escape room to society. Is the escape room open? Are you guys reopened, or is it just kind of
It's closed for
Indefinitely.
indefinitely
yeah
Yeah.
until this whole thing is done? Because Hawaii's doing fine, right?
for now.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So yes, we're lucky we're isolated. So it was easy. There's only, one airport. You can't take the boat. You can't drive. So it was easy to manage. But it's open for tourists now with some precautions. But it's going to explode again.
Yeah. Tourists, in order to not quarantine, they have to take a 3-day prior pre-test. But a lot can happen in 3 days. And we also are finding that cases are popping up. And these are cases in people who did pre-test. And we know from all types of current events that one test might not be enough. So we're kind of hiding out at home, taking food to go, being really careful because we just feel like it's a matter of time and we've gotten really lucky.
Yeah. On the plus side, sometime last year, we did start to work on Society of Curiosities because we are in the middle of the Pacific. We felt like no one was getting to experience our games. We thought we were doing a pretty good job, and we just were wanting to share with more people, get a wider audience. So we started planning that last year.
Yeah, and we've been looking at the market for kind of mysteries by mail or play at home escape games for a couple of years.
Hmm.
Um, you know, we were looking at kind of the more mainstream games and a couple others just to see what the market was like and kind of just waiting for the right time to jump in. Like Yacine said, we really wanted to reach a little further because our island has 60,000 people. And when people come on vacation, they might play an escape game. And I love your cat.
Don't mind me. This is Kiki. I'm just living in her house, and she has kind of claimed my office as her own because there's a heater underneath my feet and there's a window right there. And so I
Yeah.
just decided that like she's just going to be part of this now. And so keep going. Don't let me interrupt you with Kiki.
So great. Yeah. So tourists don't necessarily come to Hawaii to play escape rooms. So we decided we wanted to do more. And that's how we started coming up with the society. We had, storylines and a name and puzzles all designed like November, December, January. We were working slowly because we had a job. And then the pandemic hit, and we're like, all right, we are doing this now. Like, we are going pedal to the metal.
It's so cool to see, you guys, and I interviewed the ladies up in Canada from Scarlet Envelope, and they started after the pandemic. And, obviously the Post Curious, Rita, she's been, kind of doing it for a while. It's just so cool. Okay, I gotta write this down. I see 3 stars. 1 is 3. For anybody that's just jumping in, they're doing a puzzle. And the puzzle is observation puzzle, and they keep saying, doing these lifting the mugs up, and I lose my train of thought because I know that I'm going to get hit with the puzzle. I'm going to struggle with it because it's very, I don't know, on brand with me. What am I doing, Bus? I love this so much. Okay. And so it's just so cool to see this industry and Kickstarters come out, and there's like Kickstarters come out and they just go crazy. So let's talk a little bit about the Kickstarter you guys had, and then we're going to get into like this. And for anybody that is joining and watching, if you do have any questions you want to ask Michelle and Yacine, the proprietor of the Society of Curiosities, which is, I like to call it a puzzle tale. Rita kind of came up with that, and I think it just fits so well. But a subscription by mail kind of treasure hunt that involves actual items, which actually have like a coin. I'm going to throw some things out just because I can. Like old school maps, which that was a really cool puzzle. You guys told me about how cool that puzzle was during our Instagram interview. And then I got to the maps and I had to do the puzzle. But it's just a blast. Little wax sealed envelopes, which is extremely on brand for me. And it's wonderful. So, what made you, and this is actually a question that I got from Instagram, what made you decide on like a fairy tale themed, because it's more murder mystery, correct? The fairy tale files?
Yes and no. So it's not your traditional murder mystery where it's like all who done it, and it's not a murder mystery party, obviously.
Yeah.
We kind of take out the tedium of like the list and the checklist and the contrast and compare. It's probably 50-50 world exploration and unlocking things and doing fun things like a spell, because you can in a fairy tale world, as well as examining suspects and seeing what they have to say.
So it's a solve a mystery whodunit adventure more than a solve a mystery whodunit deep investigation where you get like you have to read a lot of stuff or compare like tons of evidence. So it's similar to, if you've played our latest game from the Society of Curiosities, the Bewitched Circus, where you arrive in a location and you can tell your team on the ground to go investigate this place and this other place to get more information and eventually solve puzzles and figure out, in the case of the fairy tale files, who's the culprit.
Okay, that's cool. So with one thing I really, really loved about Society of Curiosities is like you get phone numbers that you text and they text back. And so do you get those scripts? Does that happen as well in fairy tale files? Because that seems like a great, just from a design standpoint, it's an easy way to like shore up everything, right? You don't run risks of somebody going off in the wrong direction because you can kind of like, even, whoever's on the other end is holding hands, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's going to be a messaging portal that's kind of themed as a storybook. So you write the story in the book, but it's the same principle where you tell your team on the ground to do things or investigate things, unlock things, and that's how you progress through the story.
Okay. Sorry, I saw something else on your mug. I don't know if you just keep moving it around, but every time you bring the mugs up, there's something new. And I'm scribbling it down so bad, I'm going to have to like ask everything again. Okay. For anybody that just joined us, because I do see more eyeballs on there, they're doing a puzzle and it has to do with observation, and it like, oh god, it's an A in an hourglass. Okay, So let's get into your processes, and kind of what makes you guys like tick, I guess, as creatives. And I like to have these parts for people that want to create something for somebody. That's kind of the cornerstone of this business. And so the first one is, what is your process for? Kiki is. Kiki.
I like that she's talking.
I know she definitely wants to. Let me add you guys in again. Okay, Kiki, if you step on my keyboard again, I'm gonna have to kick you out here. Okay, so you guys are now on the right side instead of the left, but c'est la vie. I think she has settled down a little bit. What is your process for creating a game? Like, what's your process for building a game?
Yeah, so we do almost everything together. We don't divide and conquer until we have a really set story and puzzle layout. So we start with a theme and a story, kind of build that out, think about the moments that are going to be really fun for our players. So we kind of structure that out first. And then we start to put puzzles in with those moments and 100% just integrated and linked in with the theme and the story. So, we don't just say, okay, what puzzle do I have? Let's just plop it in. We're like, okay, where are we? What do we have? Who are the players? What would make sense to be here right now?
Yes, and I think the key to what we do is that we work backwards from the moment that we want people to experience. So those are the anchors of the story, and everything else in between gets fleshed out in a way that makes sense and advances the narrative, and you can progress through a story. But we want at least two or three things to be memorable once you finish.
Mhm.
I really love the work backwards piece, because it's always so interesting when we're talking about what what that moment is, because I'm a little bit similar, where I start at the end of the entire adventure, because the end is kind of really important. No, Kiki, you're staying down here, you're in timeout. The end is so important. Kiki wants to be a star. All right, girl, yeah, go.
Yeah, she's a star.
Yeah,
The star in my heart.
I know. She's also a star of the keyboard and desk now. She's getting bold. So yeah, starting at the end is so interesting. And so it sounds like you guys start at the end of like specific points, right? Where it's not at the very end, but it's at like, these are the big pieces, and then you work backwards to get people to those specific points.
Hmm.
Do you ever have times where you're just like kind of going like, not making it up as you go along, but you're like, let's just kind of like keep going with this and see where this leads to? Or do you always have like, this is the point we're at and we're going to move backwards from there?
No, we're flexible because, even not, we know this from all the designers that not every puzzle works. So, I mean, sometimes you have to be flexible and be able to move. And I think you hear it from a lot of people you interview. The beta testing drives your design so much. And, you know, sometimes we see beta test and it's just not working and we have to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we see a beta test and they have a solution that's just cooler than what we thought of, and we're gonna change it and go with what they thought of.
Yeah, I've heard of different experienced designers and puzzle room creators will literally create a puzzle that's impossible to beat, and they will film a bunch of like smart people and just people in general. And I say smart, but I mean like puzzle friendly people, because it's a language you learn,
Mhm.
and then they'll just see where their brain goes, and then they'll create a new puzzle based on what they see from a puzzle that just like can't be beat and can't be done, which I love and also kind of hate a little bit. I was like, as someone that like is struggling with your puzzle, I hate that, but I also love the idea of like, oh, that's cool. That's a cool way that they went, and this is different. Okay. On that note, do you guys have any favorite tiles or like? I don't like saying favorite puzzles because it feels, I don't know, too like specific, or like just favorite themes or types or feelings you like to elicit from your players.
Wow, good question.
Well, I have an answer.
Oh, go for it.
Always. Well, we were just talking about this yesterday, that I think the moments that are the most fun for us are when they begin to really trust and interact with the character on the ground. So with all of our stories, you're not the main person, you're the researcher, you're the brains behind the mission. and you're interacting with someone on the ground who's there to do things for you and show you things and move the game along. And so when we see players really get into it and start understanding the story that's moving them along, that's the fun part. Or when they talk to the character and they're like, "Oh, you're okay, be careful," or they're like, "Thank you for your hard work." It's just, it makes you feel that they got it. They got it and they're playing the way they should be playing.
Yeah, and for me personally, I code the AI. So when people are confused whether it's a real person or not, replying to the messages, that always makes me feel good.
That's really something. And I had a lot of fun messing with it. Was it Steiner? It's been a minute. Yeah, just kind of chatting with him. Do you have times where someone will ask a question like? I guess you can kind of keep adding things, right? If you find people are asking the same kind of innocuous question, are you able to program in like, oh, we're going to have an answer for this, and so he like keeps getting smarter, or is it usually pretty?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's so cool. So it just like keeps going.
It does.
Yeah, it's one of the things that's great about the system that we have is that we can see game logs and keep refining. And we also get to see the sticking points, if there are any. Sometimes there's unforeseen things. There's only so much beta testing that you can do. So the first
Yeah.
few weeks that the game is out, we get alerts when the AI encounters something that's unforeseen. So we can keep tweaking the games, even live, so that the first games, are as great as games like 6 months down the line.
Oh, that's cool. I have a question from the chat. This is from Chris, whom I love, who is very active. We just made him a moderator on the Constructed Adventure subreddit because he does some awesome,
Nice.
awesome things. And he says, I love the idea of hidden compartments in escape rooms, just like you were talking about, Michelle. Is there any way to incorporate hidden compartments in the packages you send through the mail? And he caveats this and says, please disregard this if answering the question gives anything away. So like if you don't want to answer this, we do not have to answer this. But if you do, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, especially if you're kind of mass producing it.
Yes, definitely ways. We've actually just played a game. I don't want to say what the game is because then it will spoil the game. I wish I could say it, but I don't want to spoil the game. There's a great game market that is mass produced. And maybe I'll say a couple of my games later. Favorite games, I'll say my favorite games later and we'll mix it in so you don't know which one it is.
Love it.
So there's one that's mass produced that has done an amazing job with this. Like, I am a huge fan of this game. And we've also seen the hidden compartment idea in a couple other more like small mom and pop games. So yes, it's totally doable. And the challenge is just how to do it in a way that people don't see it coming because it has been done.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's kind of the hiding in plain sight problem, right? Our next adventure for the Society of Curiosities has something that's kind of hidden in plain sight.
But it's not a secret compartment.
It's not a compartment per se.
Yeah, but we also do have secret compartments that you get to find throughout the game, but it's just not in your physical box.
Yeah, I run into that issue a little bit too because I always want to have those like when I do these adventures, it's about the surprise and the feeling you elicit. And there's nothing cooler than having something that was like under their nose the whole time that they could have seen the whole time, but they just didn't think. But then you run this huge risk of like breaking your game by accident when they like drop the box and the compartment pops open and now they're at stop 2 with the instructions for stop 12 and you're like, ah. And so it's kind of a risk reward thing too for anybody that's watching this. It's like trying to think about using hidden compartments or like boxes. I have some like here in my office that I use where it's like, oh yeah, it opens, but then if you like pop out this thing, like the bottom thing slides open. And I've always been super, super nervous to use them in any other capacity that isn't like an Easter egg, just because I need to make sure, like if it's a marriage proposal, like the proposee can't arrive 4 hours early, or even 30 minutes early. We have to make sure that it's correct. That's a great question, Chris. And any other questions? Feel free to pop them back in. So,
one more thing. It makes me think about like we do a ton of research for all of our games.
Yeah.
So for our first game, Captain Maddox's Treasure, we went to a pirate museum in St. Augustine.
Oh, wow.
And it's an amazing museum. We didn't expect it. We thought it would be like a total tourist trap, but it's an amazing museum. If you're in St. Augustine, go. But they even have some boxes from real pirates that have hidden compartments.
Oh my God.
And to see something that's real and kind of geek out on it is
Yeah.
just the coolest thing.
Yeah, one of the things that I love actually behind me, I have a 16th century, it's actually a French women's clothing trunk. I can kind of move this out of the way a little bit to see it better.
Gorgeous.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and I absolutely love it. And unfortunately, the key is gone and the latch doesn't work. And I want so badly to be able to, like, figure out a way to get that to work to utilize it in an adventure. But luckily, I have one beneath it that has like a great latch and works. I'm hearing the Kauai roosters in the background because you guys live
Yeah.
on Kauai,
You are.
right? Okay, look at this quick. I see a white pawn. And anybody in the chat that wants to help out, if you have questions or ideas about whatever this observation puzzle is that they have, that absolutely has to do so far with their coffee mugs. But I see Michelle reaching for something, so I'm wondering what's
Oh, it's
next.
just a cat.
Uh-huh.
Our cat decided to say hi.
Oh, yeah, saying hi to Kiki.
He's like, well, one cat photobomb. This one gets to.
Yeah. So white pawn and then a time. Or hourglass, but I think it's time. Okay.
And while you're thinking about that, like you said, you have to be so careful about people solving things early. We have that in our games. We have to kind of program the AI to put them back on track. And when we were designing escape rooms, we actually took that knowledge of how people interact. Like people don't search very well.
Yeah.
So we take that knowledge and put it into games. Like if there's a rug, a really big rug, people search the corners, but they don't search the middle of the rug usually.
Yeah.
So you turn that into a puzzle.
It's
so
wild.
It's fun to know how people operate.
Now, did you guys have like a design or a game background? I know you talked about Dungeons and Dragons, and that's big. I interviewed the hosts of Escape This Podcast, which is very much like a mesh of like escape room and kind of the D&D style. Because I, of course, play D&D. D&D is awesome and fun, and I'm bummed because my group just kind of fizzled out and I don't have another group. But do you find that really helps, just like your background, knowing like the ins and outs of D&D really helps with this?
Yes. And our style of play for our games, because you are talking to your team on the ground, there's many elements of succinctly painting a picture of what's going on. And even though the players are researchers at home at the society headquarters, they have to just imagine where their team on the ground is. That's very similar to role-playing games where the game master will describe the scene and then you interact with it. Also, there's a lot of role-playing game elements that have to do with like solving situational puzzles. And so that's, 20 years of design and puzzles in a way. Then combined with designing escape rooms. We built like 10 in 5 years. So that's a lot of, and we monitor the game. So we've seen thousands and thousands of games. So all that combined, I think really helps get things faster. Like it cuts down on the beta testing a bit.
And I have a background in psychology and education. So I taught for 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
So interacting with high school students for 10 years also gives you a very good peek into how people think.
Probably a lot to do with patience too.
That too.
That's it's wild because sometimes people will be like, this is a puzzle. Like I want you to build me a puzzle, and you're like, you can't just like here's a Sudoku. Like I wrote in the numbers and it's fine. Like there's so much more to like the whole experience than just puzzles, and so many people that's where they latch on to, where they're like, you do this, it's all about the puzzles, and you're like, it is, but it also isn't, because it's everything in between. So going to that, do you have anything like what's your least favorite type of experience or puzzle or anything like that?
Well, you actually made me think about player experience. Many players are programmed to think I'm looking for a puzzle. So just like when you go into some escape rooms because you've played some before that do certain things, you have that prior knowledge that impacts. So, some players look for numbers or they look for letters that could be an anagram or something. And our games aren't like that, unless there's a scenario that for some reason it is, like there's a puzzle in the game, but otherwise you won't see that in our game.
Yeah, what we like as players is to be taken on a ride. So we like more narrative driven games as a general rule. We're not heavy puzzler people, so if there is a very difficult puzzle, we are shameless hint askers. We don't care if we don't get it, as long as once you look at the answer, you're like, oh, that's really clever. As long as you're like we want to avoid, like, I would never have gotten that, of course.
Mhm.
But yeah, so we like to be taken on the ride.
Yeah, it's interesting. In one of my favorite book, the Puzzlecraft book, he talks about the difference between hints and clues and how,
Mm.
in a vacuum, they're essentially the same thing. But when you put them in the game design world, um, like clues are something that's meant to be discovered, like it's meant to be part of the game, versus hints where it's like that little, like, here's the rope, here's the lifeline I'm throwing you. And so if you can try to find a different way to shape what's supposed to be a clue and what's supposed to be a hint, it can, help the experience and whatnot.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay, so with that, with likes and dislikes, how do you determine difficulty? Because I did the Society of Curiosities by myself, because my roommates don't do this, which makes me really sad. And it was difficult. And so I would imagine this is something that's meant to be done by like a group and a family. It seems like as I was doing it by myself, and I loved it, don't get me wrong. As I was doing it by myself, I was like, man, this would be perfect with two more people, to have somebody
Mhm.
on the computer trying to do the research and figure out things and if this is part of it or not, and then other people that are working through the cryptography or the puzzly aspects of it, and then bouncing ideas off each other. And I've kept the last two installments, and I'm literally just I'm going home to visit my parents and like quarantining and doing that. Like I'm getting there and I'm sitting in a back room for a week. But then when my brother drives in, like as a family, we'll have a week together for Thanksgiving. I'm going to be like, all right, we're playing these games as a family. So I'm very, very excited. But how do you determine the difficulty? I just went on a very long rant.
It's not easy. A lot of the puzzles we design, we think will be easy, and they turn out to be like the hardest puzzle in the game. So beta test is, I think, our best indicator of difficulty.
Mhm.
And it varies so much by player. Some players are, like you said, it's a language, puzzling. So the more familiar you are with types of puzzles, it does make it a lot easier. We do throw people for loops. Sometimes we take what's a familiar puzzle and we tweak it so it's not. So therefore, if you have familiarity, it hurts your
Mhm.
advantage. Some people like to play our game and just chew on it. Like they'll play it, they'll come into a puzzle, they'll walk away, sleep on it, come back, reapproach it. I prefer to play it a group.
Yeah.
Difficulty, give me the.
Yeah, you can tell if a puzzle takes snippets from multiple
Hmm.
items in the game or multiple places in the game. That's always a bit harder. I think more than difficulty, which can vary per person, what we want to make sure is anytime there's a harder section or a section that could be harder, we put a gimme afterwards to keep the momentum going. So after expending some energy to solve something difficult, you get quick wins after and you get reinvigorated. I
Yeah.
think I think that makes sure that everybody has an enjoyable experience, no matter how difficult the game was for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's yeah. It's so smart and it's so important too. Occasionally I'll get people that hire me that are like, we want a challenge and we want it to be 10 hours of just like
Yeah.
nonstop puzzles, and I'm like, no, you don't. No, no, you don't. You don't want a
Yeah.
challenge. You want this to be beatable. Okay, Rebus. Somebody in the chat, please help me out with this. Okay, so we're gonna take a quick second. We're gonna cut away from the questions. We're gonna puzzle for a little bit, just because I'm literally getting distracted by this. And between this and Kiki and my internet, it's just like too much for my brain
Take
to
that,
handle.
pat your head, rub your.
I know, so many things to focus on. Okay, so we are doing a puzzle. We have been doing a puzzle. There are, I see, yeah, Rebus. That's what we have, or Busry, depending on, I don't know if they meant to change it up. But thank you, Chris. So we have on the bottom of the mug, we have Rebus. On the left one, we have 3 wands, and then we have What Am I Doing? On the back side of the wands, there is a white pawn, and then on the back side, there is an A with an hourglass. So we have white pawn, A with hourglass, Rebus, What Am I Doing? 3 wands. I'm going to assume. I shouldn't assume anything. I'm going to start, and you can correct me if I assume, that each individual mug is its own word, and then combining them together is like maybe something a little extra. Because I feel like the way this would be designed is they could be on their own, but then also be better together. Kind of like if if you dress up as like a bottle of ketchup for Halloween and like your spouse dresses up as a bottle of mustard, like they still play by themselves, but like they're really good together. Am you even close on that regard?
Close. You're looking. I can tell what I can tell what he's looking for, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're looking for a phrase.
A phrase. Okay. I've done enough of these, and I had some with gosh, there's other guests that I've had where it's been like figure out the phrases. Okay, so we have pond.
So we do have an order. So we've been drinking these in a specific order.
Yes. I wonder what I'm doing could be something like that, because it's a one. What am I doing? Drinking. Okay. Drink bus. Oh my god, chat, help me. Pond. I ponder. Wand, pond. No.
This side, I think, is easier to solve and might give
That's true.
a good track for the other side of the mugs.
Pawn a time, pawn a glass. I know. It's got to be like pawn a can't be a hourglass. It's got to be pawn
And it's related to our upcoming project, our current Kickstarter, the fairy
Ooh,
tale.
the fairy. Oh, this is so fun. Are these mugs for sale? Is it part of it? Because
Yeah.
Do your action.
Dang
He's
it.
doing a specific action.
okay, drinking, right? Or sipping, or
Mhm.
yes, a sip. One sip. Pawn. Oh my god. Okay.
Just keep going. You're doing
I know. I'm just like working it out loud. Okay. I know any second my mom's gonna text me because for some reason she doesn't go in chat. She texts me.
Let's have him say it faster.
Wand's what I'm doing. That's a wand, right?
Uh-huh.
Wands. What am I doing?
Do what you're doing.
Sip. One sip. Pawn. A time. Once upon a time. Ah! Oh god. Oh
And the
wow.
bottom is just saying what type of puzzle this is. Oh, wrong bottom.
There we go. A rebus puzzle.
a rebus puzzle.
Ooh, yeah. So let's talk about what a rebus puzzle is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So go ahead.
It's a puzzle where images represent a sound or word, and you put all the images together. So, and it makes a phrase or,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. I realized that I might have just had this on mute, so I'm going to go look back and see if this whole thing was muted. But I did get it. It was once upon a time. Wand, sip, on, pawn, a, time. Hey, and we got somebody else got it too. I actually kind of like the fact that I was muted because then we do it. There's conversations in the background of Kiki, and so I've decided to try to mute myself when I'm not talking. But then of course I forget to unmute it. Oh, that was a really really cool puzzle. That's really great. And so a rebus puzzle is a puzzle where you have images that look like pieces of a phrase. Is that correct?
Yeah, like
correct.
common ones are like an I, so it
Yeah.
stands for I.
Yes.
And it's also ones where it could be positional too. Like you've seen the ones where it says reading and there's lines separating the word and it's reading between the lines.
Yeah.
These are ones that I just loved. Going back to my past, I loved these things. Like in elementary school, when you finished your work, they would give you these.
Yeah.
Love these puzzles.
My personal one was the logic puzzles that I loved, where it was like, one that I use all the time when I'm doing like a Mexican army cipher because it's simple but also not, is like, there are 10 candles in a room and they're all lit. And then a gust of wind comes in and blows out 3 of. Oh, okay. We lost it for a second, but we are back. So I'll start over again. It's a great logic problem, and it's basically there are 10 candles lit in a room. Gust of wind comes in, blows out 3 of the candles. You shut the window so the wind won't blow out any more candles, and you go to bed. And when you wake up, you discover that 2 more candles have blown out. How many candles are left?
Sounds like 5, but it would be too obvious. Or it
But
wouldn't be a puzzle.
wouldn't they all just melt down overnight?
Uh-huh.
Maybe no.
I
because they've all
definitely could have
melted
done
down.
better with numbers because the answer is correct whether you got it right or wrong. But the answer would be five. But the idea is most people would assume the candles that melt are the ones that are left over versus the ones that are still standing. So in my case, I should have done
Got
like
it.
four, so it would have been 6 and 4. I picked numbers out of my head because it can be any number, but it works out really well if you're trying to do just some like little padlock number or some number from Mexican Army Cipher. So I always love those where it's like it seems really obvious, but you have to think about the logic. I'll do one more because I love it too. There are 8 crows sitting on a fence, and a farmer shoots 2 of them. How many crows are left?
I know this one.
Probably none. They'll fly away.
Yes, that is exactly it. They all fly away. But your first thing is like, well, it'd be 6, and then you think about that. So yeah, it's those have always been my favorites. They seem obvious, but they're not obvious. Cool. So we have just a little bit more time for chat. If you do have any questions for Michelle and Yacine regarding escape room creation, puzzle tales, their new puzzle tale that is rounding the finish of its Kickstarter campaign after already kind of crushing their goals, don't hesitate to ask. Let's talk a little bit. I have 2 more questions. The first one is, how has the pandemic impacted your creativity?
We talk about this not so much on creativity, but time. There is this moment in the pandemic where everyone was stopping, kind of like just, and we weren't. We were like, okay, we're going. So we were rushing when everyone was stopping, and we haven't slowed down yet. For me, it hasn't impacted my creativity. I think it's fun. Like, I love working with Yacine because I can't get my ideas out unless I'm working with someone. Like, I just can't make it work. He could just sit there and I can make it work, but I just need him around
Oh,
to do it. But I feel creative, but there's also this fear of like, don't screw it up. Every game we do is like, don't mess this up. Like, we've been really fortunate to have great reviews, and we're kind of building an amazing fan base, and you connect with those people and don't want to fail them. So there is a little bit of that stress coming
Yeah,
in.
that's new. Yeah, I think what affects the creativity more because of the pandemic is we lost our regular income. So if you're worried about how successful commercially the game is going to be, it can change how you approach the game in maybe not a way that's healthy. So we have to keep focusing on the games and just trust that over time, things are gonna work out, which they are. But
yes, they
that's
are.
something to be mindful of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, you mentioned like how you determine level, and that's an interesting discussion we always talk about for difficulty, because our games are challenging, but they're fair. However, we do know that some people we know who are not into escape rooms and puzzles find them really hard. So it's this hard discussion and balance of where do we place our games? Because knowing all the early adapters are really proficient puzzlers for the most part.
Yeah.
How do you place your game so you're pleasing the people that we're so happy to have on board early, but how do you build a culture of like, hints are okay, and we give you some easy ones so you feel good, but you still learn to become a stronger puzzler,
Yeah.
because you have to grow your audience, and at some point it won't be the hardcore puzzlers.
Yeah, exactly. It is a tricky thing. You're balancing, you're a business, so you want to have as many sales as possible. Like, that's pretty normal. But your early adopters are absolutely going to be the ravenous puzzlers, and then they're going to convince their friends to get it. And is it possible to do something where you have like an easy, medium, and hard level? Is it possible to do this and that? Like, I'm sure you guys have kind of thought about that. I'm lucky where my things are all very single serving. So it's like, oh, I know exactly the level I need to do for this one person. But when you're doing it for a lot more people, it can be really, really difficult. So,
Yeah.
This actually, I have slightly more questions. This was a great question from actually the ladies over at Scarlet Envelope. What is the hardest part of your job?
The hardest part of my job, I think, is coding the AI, because people are insane. They come up with the strangest things. So that's challenging. Because you have to give it a starting point. Yeah, it learns over time, but you have to give it a starting point. And we've had games where like day one, instead of being just like a couple of alerts because the AI, wasn't like quite there, day one was all failure. So we had to like manually scramble and reply to people while
Yeah.
fixing the code, and so that's happened once. So that's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I think the hardest part of my job is patience, because you get to that point where you kind of have a frame of a puzzle, but then you have to test and test and test, and it feels like sometimes it just takes forever. But that's the most important part of for us. Like that's the most important part of game design is saying how does this puzzle play? And sometimes you think you do 6 beta tests and you think you'll be close, and then you see something that happens and it's like, well, that's totally valid and we need to exit that answer out and we have to kind of come back and keep tweaking. Sometimes you feel so tantalizingly close and then you're not.
It's hard on the ego
Uh,
playtesting,
Yeah.
very hard.
yeah, absolutely. And it's so important to like check your ego at the door, um, because you like it can be difficult. It can hurt.
My baby.
Yeah, I know. Like I love this. This is fun. Why aren't you having fun?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would have fun if this was you.
yeah.
Oh man.
So it's not our decision ultimately what's
Yeah,
fun.
and then we have to make sure that we've talked about this before, but with beta tests, you really have to let people know that you are helping us by saying when you're not having fun.
Yes.
You are helping us when you ask for a hint. Like we don't want people to suffer because we're watching them. We like to watch or listen to all of our beta tests.
Yeah.
We don't just give it out and ask for feedback because there's so much that we see or hear that goes on that they might not tell us otherwise.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, it's hard to tell people we want to know the bad as well
Yeah.
as the good because we want some compliments.
Yes. Yeah. Please be nice, but
But
like
that's
be honest.
so helpful in our
Yeah.
beta testers who are honest.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then the final question I always like to ask is, what have you learned?
So much.
So
Hmm.
much.
Specific.
Looks like you guys are. Your screen is frozen, but I can still hear you, so you can still answer.
All right.
What have we learned? We've learned um, to play with the new storytelling medium.
Mm.
It offers brand new avenues, but no one's ever done it. And you can see it in our games, and I think most games that came out since March. If a game publisher has published 2 or 3 games, you can see how much more fun they're having with the medium
Mm-hmm.
and ways they find to incorporate puzzles and story elements, and it's changing really fast. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I've learned how many amazing puzzlers there are out there.
Oh, yeah.
You
There's so
know,
many.
when we design games for escape rooms in the middle of the Pacific on Kauai, we don't see those people. So, the thousands of games we've watched, we don't see those people coming through. And our first game kind of threw us for a loop. We had a cipher in it.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't realize people would just attack a cipher without having a key of how to do it.
They always do.
So there are so many people that have this other just superpower of crazy puzzling powers that we have to design for to keep them from just kind of hacking away at our puzzles without going along the right train of path.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one interesting thing that I've
Hmm.
learned is to watch out for those and to make sure the game is enjoyable for them as well so they can't skip big chunks of puzzles.
Yeah, I do a lot of YouTube videos on this channel other than interviewing you, and it's a lot of times it's breaking down like, oh, this is this type of cipher. It's not strong. A Caesar cipher is so easy to brute force because you just start to look at the patterns and you could figure it out. But it's like if you're going to use a Mexican army cipher, that thing's not going to be brute forced if you don't want it to be. And so, but it's like there are definitely times where you want to have a Caesar cipher, and there are definitely times where you don't want to have it. You don't want to make it too easy. And so it's so interesting to figure out like when's the best, when and where and how is the best way to use this. So thank you guys so much. I'd put you guys back up here, but your screen is still frozen because my internet is terrible. And so after this, I'm going to be having a very long call with Comcast, who is being paid a lot of money to provide this terrible, terrible internet. But tell me a little bit about where I can find you guys, or where anybody can find you guys.
You can find us at societyofcuriosities.com. on social media, facebook.com/Society of Curiosities and Society of Curiosities on Instagram. We also have a Kickstarter that's going on for 5 more days, so until November 10th or 11th, called the Fairy Tale Files. So check us out on Kickstarter, and that is where to find us.
Okay, so I'm typing in really quick the Fairy Tale Files. Files. So just in case, you are hunkering down for what is looking like could be a little pretty long winter and you need something to do. Actually, though, I would assume sometimes Kickstarters are, they finish and then you get the work done. But if you want something now, Society of Curiosities is amazing. I play it. I love it. And if you want something, I'm assuming for the future, Fairy Tale Files is going to be the way to go, correct?
Yes.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much. For those watching, I'm actually going to take a break from interviewing. I'm going to be flying home this weekend for a month to visit my parents, and I feel like if I'm going to visit them, I might as well be there for a long time. So I will not be doing any live interviews potentially for the rest of the year. We will see how I feel in December. I'm going to be trying to do my Reddit Secret Santa gift exchange, so I might be putting a lot of my focus into that. But otherwise, thank you guys so much. Everybody stay safe. Good luck with the turnout of this election, and happy adventuring.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye. Thank you.